Hi there, and welcome to the What's New webinar for the latest version of Mission Control. Version 1.61 will be released on the App Exchange on the 17th of June. We've got a number of enhancements to existing features primarily coming in this release, so let's jump in and take a look. So just a quick overview of some of the key enhancements. So we've made a number of updates to the Gantt chart. We've also introduced a new feature to most places where you can create a new action, allowing you to set the end date by specifying a start date and number of working days. A number of enhancements to dependencies, so you can now manage checklists. You can manage dependencies at the checklist item level, and you can also have a number of other scenarios where the milestone you can have milestone to milestone, checklist to checklist. We've also introduced a finish to finish relationship as well, so we'll cover all of that off in detail shortly. As part of that work, we've also enhanced the dependency notifications. So they would previously be sent out every time one of the predecessors met the criteria. Now it's only being sent out when all of the predecessors have met the criteria. A few updates to the timesheet and to the scheduler. We've also made some updates to the whiteboard. We've made an update to the role utilization that factors in role actuals and role allocations, as well as role availability records, and we've also factored in those role allocations to the resource assignment wizard. So we'll just walk through all of that in a bit more detail before we jump in and actually have a look at the demo. So from the Gantt charts perspective, we made a number of additional features available. So as part of that start date and working day functionality, you can now leverage that on the Gantt chart. So when you're creating actions from the Gantt chart, you can specify the start date and working days, and it will automatically calculate the end date. For those customers who are not logging time, they might want to use the completion percentage manually. We've now introduced a slider on the Gantt chart that actually allows you to just slide the progress bar up and down and that will manually adjust the completion percentage field on the action record. We've just added a feature that will allow you to specify whether when you're loading the Gantt chart onto for a large project, you'll have the choice to either load to today or load to the start of the project. And we've also made so this one won't necessarily be anything visually obvious in terms of the change, but we've converted the Gantt chart back to a Visualforce page. So a number of customers were experiencing intermittent issues with the Gantt chart that were really being caused by Lightning Experience caching duplicate instances of the Gantt component during one browser session. So this would typically result in a variety of errors, such as the Gantt not loading after editing the project, or the dependency logic within the library not being fully loaded. So to provide a more stable environment for the Gantt chart, it's been completely redeveloped within the Visualforce framework, removing the need for a Lightning component, therefore removing the caching issue. So there's no action required to take advantage of that enhancement. As I say, everything will look and appear the same. So as part of that start date and working days update, so as I say, the feature is that you can specify the start date and then you can add the number of working days. So let's say it might be a 12-week action. So rather than you having to manually count forward 12 weeks to get to the end date that you want, you can simply put in the number of working days, and taking into account non-working days and holidays, it will automatically calculate the end date. So that feature has been added to the Create Actions page, the Add Action component of the trackpad, the Add Action component of the scheduler, the Add Action component of the project builder, and the whiteboard. So as I say, dependency enhancement. So we've introduced another dependency type. So existing functionality allows you to create finish to start and start to start relationships. What you can also now do is create a finish-to-finish relationship. And to expand the flexibility around the dependency relationships, previously the child always had to be an action and the parent could be a milestone or an action. The relationships can now span across the milestone, action, and checklist item objects. So you can see listed there all of the different relationship types that you can have. The dependency notification distribution logic has also been enhanced. So previously, if an action was dependent on two or more predecessors, then every time one of those predecessors met the criteria to notify the people involved in the child, that email would be sent. That logic's been changed to where it will only be sent out now when all predecessors have met the criteria. So in a finish to start relationship, the email will only be sent when all predecessors are complete or cancelled. And on a start to start relationship, emails will be sent when all predecessors are in progress or cancelled. So a few timesheet enhancements. The Approvals tab now has settings that you can choose to set the specific visibility of each column. So if, for example, you're only ever doing project owner approvals and you don't need role manager approvals, then you can hide those fields to free up the space on the page. The timesheet will now exclude actions with a status of cancelled. The time log modal has a number of standard fields in there, such as time log notes, completion percentage, checklist items. You can now use the settings on the timesheet to hide any of those fields that you aren't needing to use. And you can also set a role to be excluded from the timesheet. So when you're switching to view another person's timesheet, you might, for example, have a number of assets or a number of placeholder roles that you don't want to see in that list. So you can just set their individual role record to be excluded from the timesheet. A few enhancements to deliver on a few customer requests on the scheduler. So the hover content on the when you're looking on the projects tab of the scheduler, you can now add your own fields to a field set in the same way that you can do on the actions hover. You also have a setting that allows you to view all holidays or approved holidays. So previously, by default, it would only show you approved holidays. Now if you have all holidays set, it will show all holidays regardless of their approval status. Approved holidays will be displayed in red, and anything else will be displayed in amber. Another feature that has been added is a filter on the scheduler that allows you to just view roles that are already assigned to work or all roles. So for example, a number of customers want to be able to use this in context of the project overview where they don't want to see a list of everyone, they only want to see a list of the people that have already got assignment of something on the project. And you can also control the default loading behavior on the project overview and when you're using Scheduler Anywhere. That will allow you to specify whether you load to the start of the project or load to today. And there's just an additional filter being added where you can actually filter down on the status field on the project record. In terms of whiteboard enhancements, a couple of filter enhancements there. So we've added in an overall and or toggle for all of the encompassing all of the role filters. So if you're searching for a project owner and action owner, you can choose to be toggling where it would be project owner and action owner or where it was project owner or action owner. So you have flexibility around that. You've also got the ability to apply custom field filters on the whiteboard now as well. And across the project, milestone, and action, we've added in fields that allow you to exclude those projects or milestones or actions from being visible on the whiteboard as well. So if you have certain internal projects that you don't necessarily want to be visible on the whiteboard, you can exclude the entire project or exclude individual actions. There's a feature on the whiteboard now where you can create a new milestone. So if you're working on a project and you need to add a new milestone, you don't have to go off anywhere else to do that. You can do that directly on the whiteboard. And when viewing the whiteboard in context of a project overview, you've now got a separate persistent column heading setting in comparison to the standalone whiteboard. So, for example, you might want to set the column heading to be milestone when you're viewing the whiteboard in context of a project overview. And previously, if you did that, you would have to do that every time you went to the whiteboard. Now that will be persistently remembered. For the role utilization, again, similar to the whiteboard, we've added in the ability to exclude specific projects and their milestones and actions from the role utilization. So again, if it was an internal project you're not wanting to necessarily factor into role utilization reporting, you can choose to exclude that. The hours per week, that's been modified. So previously, if there was, so for example, if I was running a report from January through to June and I had a new person start in April, because they were being included in the report, they would actually have shown available right for that through that reporting period. So now there's logic being added in to where they will only appear available based on them having an actual role record from the date that it was created, or from role availability records that relate to that role record. And we've also factored in role allocations and role actuals to get more specific reporting around hours scheduled and hours achieved. The resource assignment wizard, you now have the ability to choose to include Salesforce events into the hours being displayed. You can also choose to include hours from role allocations that relate to role forecasts. And overall, we're referencing role allocations where they exist. So you're getting a very specific reporting on the hours based on those role allocation records. So a few minor enhancements as part of the rollout of the resource forecasting. The force financials recalculation process has been enhanced to where it will now also recalculate any role actuals that relate to the time logs on a project. The role trigger has been enhanced, so when you're adding a master team, so previously when you, in order to populate the master team field on the role record, you would need to go to the team assignment and flag a specific team as the master team. So now what you can do when the master team field is populated directly on the role record, if there is no team assignment for that team, a new team assignment will be created and it will automatically be set as the master team field. And if a master team field is populated and there is already a team assignment, but it's not yet marked as the master team, then that will be marked, that master team field will be marked true as well. And then when a new role is created, any role allocation records will be created for that role for any future global holidays that exist. The checklist board has just had a persistent setting to where you can select specific pick list options. So, for example, if you're working on the checklist board, viewing the status as the column heading, you would be able to select to only view certain status values. So you might, for example, choose to exclude on hold and cancelled. So you're just looking at planned, in progress, and complete. And a persistent setting has been added to the role forecast component, enabling users to set their preference value for the days and weeks and number of days and weeks view options. So previously, these values would need to be set each time the user loaded the component. They'll now be persistently remembered each time you visit that component. Okay, so let's jump in and take a look at some of those major enhancements in a bit more detail. So we're going to take a look at the working days feature to start with. So you'll see here I've got a project with one milestone. What I'm going to do is actually just use the inline edit functionality of the Gantt chart to create a few actions. Okay, so adding in 3 actions, they've all defaulted to today. So what I'm able to do now is actually just come through and set the working days for each one of them. And that will automatically adjust the end date, factoring in any weekends and any holidays as well. So I'm just going to set that to 3 days. I'll set that one to 2, and we'll set this one to 5. So while I'm here, I'm also going to create some dependencies between these actions. I'm just going to say that's dependent on the design wireframes, and that one is dependent on the design UI. So quickly, you can see just by setting the number of working days, it's automatically adjusted the end date for each of my actions, and then obviously by putting in my dependencies, it's managed to schedule them where I would like them to be. The next feature we're going to take a look at is the completion percentage slider. So you'll see that you've got the ability now to have this slider that appears at the bottom of the action, and you can just drag that up or down to adjust the completion percentage. So this would only really be applicable if you're not logging time against the action, or if you're manually overriding that completion percentage. So that can be visible. So if I just save that, so that would update the completion percentage field on the action record. You have the ability to toggle that completion percentage slider on or off within the Gantt chart settings. So there's a new setting, completion percentage slider. So if you turn that off, you won't be able to access that slider. If it's false, obviously you will be able to. Next thing that we wanted to look at was the load to today or load to project start setting. So within the Gantt chart settings, there's a new setting here that allows you to choose whether you by default load to the project start or whether you load to today. So I'm going to set that to today. And then if I just refresh my page here, so you'll see in this instance it's loaded with today, loaded towards the start of the Gantt chart. Now I can use this button to toggle between the start of the project and today, and then if I just go back and change that setting to be the project start date, and then if I move along, and I'll just refresh that again. So in this instance, it started with the project start date rather than today. And again, I can just toggle straight to today there. Looking at the enhancements to the dependency options that we've introduced, you'll see on this Gantt chart there's a number of new features. So you're now able to, as you can see, you can create dependencies including checklist items. So I've got examples here where I've got finish to starts within these checklist item records. you can also have a new dependency relationship, which is known as finish to finish. So that will ensure that the successor cannot be finished before the predecessor. And the main thing to note here is that the flexibility that you now have around what is a parent and what is a child. So previously the parent could only be a milestone or an action, and the child could only be an action. Now the parent can be a milestone, action, or checklist, and the child can also be a milestone, action, or checklist. So for example, here you can see I've got my milestone is in a finish to start to another milestone. So you can create those dependencies right across all three layers of the project. And in terms of the dependency notification emails, so as I've mentioned earlier previously, they would come out. So in this example here, where the accounts action is dependent on both leads and cases, when either of these actions were marked as complete, people involved in this action would be sent a notification letting them know that record was complete and they could start work on theirs. That wasn't necessarily true because it was also dependent on the cases object as well. So the adjustment to when those email notifications are sent out, it will now ensure that the people involved in this action will only get notified when both of these actions have been marked as complete. And I'll just pull up a quick example of that notification. So it's basically letting me know that these are my predecessors. I can see they're both finished to start, so that tells me that these now are both complete, and we can start work on this action here. So we're going to take a look at the start date plus working days logic on the Create Actions page. But just as a reminder, this is also obviously available on the Gantt chart like we've just seen earlier in the demo. And it's also available on the Add Action components on the trackpad, the scheduler, the project builder, and the whiteboard. So in this instance, I'm just going to create an action relating to my design milestone. So I'm going to say I've got to design some wireframes. I'm going to say there's 8 hours of effort. So I'm going to set that to next Friday, Friday the 29th. And by default, obviously the end date will automatically adjust there as well. So I'm going to set Chris as the action owner, and I'm going to say I expect this to take 3 working days. So as I move out of that field, what it will do is go off and look at Chris's availability, and it's set the end date automatically to the 1st of July. So I'm just going to jump onto the scheduler here and show you that obviously Chris is available the 29th, the 30th, and the 1st. Whereas if you look at my record, I'm available on the 29th and the 30th, but then I'm on PTO right through until the 11th. So if we were to, for example, switch me as the action owner, so that's now recalculated that, and based on starting on the 29th and needing 3 working days to do that, it's automatically adjusted the end date to be the end date available based on non-working days and holidays that are assigned to me. So that working day logic will be it will actually be driven by the action owner, regardless of whether there are contributors added to that or not. So again, just to show you, so if I add in a new action, put in my hours, put in my date. So I'm going to say that this one is going to happen on the 12th, and I'm going to assign that to myself. And again, that instant, I'm just going to put in 2 working days. So that's just obviously it's factored in that I'm back from my PTO. I'm available on 12th and the 13th, so it can automatically schedule that to be finished on the 13th for me. There's a few different enhancements that have been added to the timesheet. So the first one we're going to take a look at is the approvals tab. So I'll just jump onto the approvals tab just to show you that obviously we've got fields like project milestone action all the way through to the project manager approval fields and the role manager approval fields. So you now have the ability within the timesheet settings to choose which of those fields are visible or not. So, for example, we might have no need to be dealing with Cheddar on the Approvals tab, and we might only ever use the Project Manager approval. So, to free up space on the page, we're going to choose to hide the Role Manager approval fields. So, if I just change those settings, then reload the Approvals tab. So you can see I've now lost the ability to collaborate on Cheddar, and I've now also hidden the Role Manager field. So I've just got more room available for my Project Manager approval fields. So if I do want to set that back, just jump back into my settings, and we'll set them back to false again. And click on Save. So just jump back on there one last time, and you'll see that the chat is back and the Role Manager approval columns are back as well. The other setting that we've added in is the ability to allow you to specify which of the standard fields within the time log information modal are hidden. So these are all of our standard fields, the time log notes, checklist, issue, overtime, and so on. So you can, if you're not using some of these fields, then you can remove them. So I'll just show you where that is. So if I come in and say I'm doing 2 hours on this action, double click in there, you'll see that I've got access to all of these fields. Now, I might choose to not include my my issue or my checklist. So if I just go back and go into my settings, and then I'm going to say I don't want the checklist and I don't want the issue. So hide those. So now if I do that same thing again, enter the time, double click in there. So I'm now hiding those two fields. So ultimately, just allowing you to strip this back to what bare fields you need to make it as simple as possible for your users to log their time. So I'll just turn those back on. Okay, just as a reminder, any action that has the status value of cancelled will now not be visible on the timesheet. And then the other enhancement is when I'm switching over from my timesheet to look at somebody else's timesheet, I can see a list of everyone in there. So, for example, I've currently got some placeholders. Now, this placeholder client, we're never going to log time against that. So it might be that I want to choose to not have that visible in my pick list. So what I can do is go to my role records, go to that placeholder client, and just set the exclude from timesheet field to true. So if I scroll down, I'm just going to set that field to true. Click on save. So I can see that's now been set to true. So now if I go back to the timesheet again, and I'll just filter again for those placeholders. So you can see now that that placeholder client is not visible on my timesheet. There's a number of enhancements being applied to the scheduler. So we're going to take a look at each one of those. The first one we're actually going to look at is the when you're on the projects tab of the scheduler, you can hover over a project and you'll see a hover box appear. So by default, these are the values that would appear in that hover. There's now a field set on the project object to allow you to actually remove all of the fields, replace all of the fields, excluding the scheduled this period and remaining this period. So if I go to my project object into field sets, there is now a project scheduler hover field set that I can go into, and then I could add in whatever fields that I want to include, and then that would allow me to override any of the fields that I have visible in that hover. So if I want to ever go back to what the out of the box defaults are, I would just empty that field set and then that would revert back to what you're seeing on the screen now. Another feature on the scheduler is the ability to actually now view all all holidays or just approved holidays. So previously it would only ever show you approved holidays. There is now a setting here that you can actually choose to look at all holidays. So if I change that, and then if I was to just take a look at a pending holiday. Okay, so if I set this one to pending, and then we go back and reload that scheduler. So you'll see here that my approved holidays are displayed red, and then my pending holidays are displayed in amber. So you can choose whether you're visualizing just approved holidays or any holiday, whether regardless of the approval status. So another feature that we've added in, which is primarily beneficial when you're looking at the scheduler in context of an individual project, is a filter that will show you either assigned roles or all roles. So you can have this preset to where it will just show you anyone that has been assigned work, or every single role in the system. So for example, if I go to my project here, and the only people that are assigned to this project are Bethany, Chris, and Colin. So you can see that my scheduler is filtered down to only show me those 3 individuals. So I could go in and change that filter to look at everybody. And then so if I need to reassign some work from Beth to someone else, I can actually still add them in and make that assignment. But by default for the project overview, it will set that filter to assigned roles. So you'll only see a list of people that have actually been assigned to that project. The other feature that we added when in context of the project overview or scheduler anywhere is the fact that it will default it will default to the start date of the project. So whenever you're looking at that project, so obviously if the project started 3 months ago, it would automatically default to the start date rather than defaulting to today. We've added a number of new features to the whiteboard. So a couple of enhancements to the filters first of all. So if I just load up the filters and walk you through those. So we've added in this overall and/or toggle for role filters. So previously it was always using the or functionality. So for example, if I was setting a project owner and an action owner, it would pull back everything where that person is the owner or where this person is the action owner. Whereas what we might want to do is actually apply a filter that says, I'm looking for projects where Colin is the owner and where Chris is the action owner. So by toggling to that would allow me to only see actions owned by Chris on projects owned by Colin. So you can use that and/or logic across all of the all of those role filters there. The other filter enhancements are you can now access two custom field settings as well on the project milestone or action object. So we also have included fields on the project, milestone, and action that allow you to exclude records from the whiteboard. So you'll see on my project record, there is now a field to exclude from whiteboard. So if I set that field to true at the project level, that will ripple down through all of the milestones and all of the actions. Alternatively, I can do that at the milestone level, which would ripple down to all of the actions relating to that milestone, or I could do it at the individual action level as well. another new feature that we've added in is the ability to add a new milestone directly from the whiteboard. So previously you could always add actions, but if the project was missing a milestone, you would have to go off to the project, create the milestone, and then come back. In order to ensure this button is visible, you'll just need to go into the settings and set the board features add milestone to true, and then that will make that visible for you. And then the final enhancement is the column heading setting. So you've always been able to set a persistent column heading on the whiteboard, but in order to actually use the milestone column heading, you would have to have this filtered down to one individual project, which meant you would never actually be able to set that column heading as a persistent value to the milestone. Now, when you're on the project overview, the persistent setting is separate now for the project overview as opposed to the standalone whiteboard. So for example, if you want to use your whiteboard and actually have the columns driven by the milestone, you can set that column heading as milestone in context of the project overview, and then that will be persistently remembered, so allowing you to see your columns driven by your milestones and then all of your actions within each milestone there. So enhancements for the role utilization report. So similar to the whiteboard, there are now fields where you can exclude the project from the utilization report. So for example, if this is an internal project, you don't necessarily want it impacting your role utilization figures. So you can choose to exclude that particular project, or you can also do that at the individual milestone or action level. So those fields are available at the project, milestone, and action record level. The main enhancement we've made is around the hours per week. So, so previously, if a role was included in the reporting period, the hours per week value would be taken from their role record. With the previous release earlier this year, we introduced the manage availability feature, where you can create role availability records, and equally we've added additional logic to the role utilization report in this release. So the role will only have so basically the role will display 0 if two criteria apply. So basically, if there is no role availability record for the role for the period, and the hours per week field on the role is 0 or null, then we would display 0. Or if the role created date is greater than the reporting period. So for example, you'll see here that so if I look at Chris and Colin, they're displaying zeros through all of these periods because their role records didn't exist. So they only actually joined the business in May. So that's where they became applicable for the reporting. If I scroll down to Mick, you can see that during this period of time, he obviously has a role availability record specifying that he was working 20 hours per week, and then once we reached this date, his role availability changed from 20 hours per week up to 40 hours. So giving you far more accurate reporting on the hours per week based on whether that role was actually in the business and what role availability they were working towards. The other main feature that we've added is referencing role allocation and role actuals. So for customers that are using the resource forecasting functionality, the role allocation and role actual data will be used within the role utilization reporting. So the values that will be referenced are for holiday hours, the role actuals relating to the holidays applicable to the reporting period for that week or month will be factored in, and for the total hours scheduled, the role allocations relating to actions applicable to that reporting period will be factored in as well. So ultimately giving you more accurate figures. And if you're not using the resource forecasting functionality, then figures will continue to be taken directly from the actions, time logs, and holidays. So we've made a couple of enhancements to the resource assignment wizard. Both of them are controlled via settings within the settings tabs here. So what I'm going to do is just open up the resource assignment wizard settings, and you'll see that there's now an option to include event hours. So if you set this field to true, when you are doing a search for resources, event hours will also be included, as well as the action hours. So if I expand the record for Colin here, you'll see that I've got my hours coming in from my actions, but I'm also factoring in any event hours as well. So if I'm using my Salesforce calendar and I want to factor that into my hours that have been allocated to me, I can do that. If I don't want to do that, it's just a case of setting that field back to false. The other thing that we've added in, again, for customers that are using the resource forecasting functionality, is the ability to include role forecast hours. So if you set that setting to true, you also then have an option to choose whether you're just counting forecasts, you're just counting actions, or where a project has both forecasts and actions, it will count the forecasts, or where a project has both forecasts and actions, it would count the actions. So by setting that to true and selecting one of these options, then you would be factoring in your role allocation hours from both actions and role forecasts. Okay, thanks for your time taking a look at that with us. So now let's look at when this latest release is going to become available. So as I mentioned earlier, as of the 17th of June, the upgraded version will be available for you to manually update directly from the App Exchange listing. So simply go to the App Exchange and click the Get It Now button. On the 25th of June, we will automatically upgrade Sandbox orgs, and then on the 2nd of July, we will automatically upgrade all production orgs. So finally, we'd just like to say thank you for your time. I hope you get some good value out of these feature enhancements. And any questions, please feel free to get in touch with the team. Thanks a lot. Bye.